Of the Oregon City Commission for Wednesday, 3rd, 2014. The roll call, please.
Commissioner Smith?
Here.
Commissioner Mumm?
Here.
Commissioner Roth?
Here.
Commissioner Pauly?
Here.
Mayor Neely?
Here. Could you please join me in the flag salute? We'll be saluting this flag right over here.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We're going to begin with a report from the Clackamas Heritage Partners Annual Report. We have a copy. Come on forward.
Hi, Gail. Hello. Hey, Donna.
Good evening.
Somewhere.
Good evening, Commission, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. It's another year has gone by at the end of the Oregon Trail, and we appreciate the opportunity to come and give you a report. Gail has been very diligent throughout the year, sending quarterly reports, but this time we get to come and actually speak and update you. The first thing we want to do is say a big thank you, not only to the Commission for their support and leadership, but to the staff, to Scott, to Denise, to Ann, to all of the workers that have been so diligent and so good in coming and responding to different needs as they have arisen at the end of the Oregon Trail. There's been so much accomplished this year. It's just amazing, and I know Rocky gave a little preview of some of that, I think, a little bit ago. But we have a written report. We're not going to go through the whole thing, but there's been a number of things done, and I just can't thank you and the staff enough. I think we've really grown into a true partnership, and it's been something that's been very positive and very worthwhile to see. And I want to publicly thank Gail. I don't know anyone who works any harder than her, and I think this could not be possible without her efforts there to really work and to coalesce the team from the staff members to the other organizations. She's just done a marvelous, marvelous job. We can't do it alone with just improving the site, although there's been a number of improvements done at the site this year, from new awnings to painting to remodeling to adding a TV to adding a 24-hour. All the things we talked about we've actually done, which is it's really worth noting. A lot of times you dream about doing things, but we made realistic goals and we went and attacked each one of them. And one of the things I'd like to report just tonight is today one of the biggest question marks we had was, what are we going to do with the siding? How are we going to repair the building? And we've been able to, and I'll have Gail give a little more detail to this, but we've been able to coalesce a group of volunteers and money from the city, from ourselves. We've been able to put more money into the building as Clackamas Heritage Partners along with the city than we have ever dreamt that we would be able to. And the reason we've been able to do that is because we've had improved programming in the facility, which has raised attendance. We've been able to have a ticketed price. We have money from that, and we can put that in the building. It's exactly what we wanted to do. But just today, we opened up the worst of the worst siding in the back, and we had good news. There was some damage, obviously, to the paper on the outside of the plywood, and some of the plywood was damaged, but there's no structural damage in the building itself. There's no wall damage, no sill plate damage. So they're able to fix the plywood, redo it, and put the siding on. It's very, very good news. And that was inspected by the engineer. He took pictures, and they're sending that to the building department, so it's all documented. But it was really good news. Great. So that was just today. I want to point out just a few things that did happen this year. We have new awnings, new signage, a general cleanup of the entire site. The EOT program with site maps were installed. The staff is now wearing period attire. We've worked with a number of groups. One of them, Jerry Herman, and Sean, we're able to get the Portland Trolley Historic Tours to come out and connect with the river cruise, and that's been successful. We've continued to work with Clackamas County and the Tourism and Cultural Affairs Department. Eagle Scouts have done things like painting benches. The high school is building a stage right now. You see that under construction. It's going to be a huge benefit to the area. That's going to help the site just be more multi-use. It's really a positive thing. And the high school, as we know, by looking around the other parks in the city, they do a really nice job. So we're excited about that. First year, the concerts moved down. I think it went well, and it was a good year to do that with the anticipation of the new library expansion. We worked with the college on work study programs. We worked cooperatively. Again, partnerships was the key this year. The library came down and had First Friday movies at the end of the trail this year, and that went really well also. First City Celebration was there as usual.
Well, we participated in it.
Yeah, I mean, we participated, but it was held there. The Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, right now, our staff and their staff are installing an exhibit called Before the Grand Ronde Reservation Assimilation and Indian Management in Oregon City. And it's one of the things we're most excited about. It's coming in January.
No, it's up.
It's up now.
Down in January
It's coming down.
15th, so come on over.
Yeah, there's just a little bit, but it's been a wonderful exhibit, and they've built a replica of a longhouse in the facility now, and there's much more to come. As soon as I stop, I'm going to let you talk.
Well, no. I'm just going to correct you on the Plank House exhibit. It's a facade of the front.
Yeah.
And then,
It's
and
not a-
we're
it's
still
not a complete
working-
house.
Yeah, right, because there was some,
The,
questions about that.
We do hope in the future to actually have a longhouse or a plank house on site. It's one of our future
Vision.
dreams. I'm going to come back and talk about maybe just future, some things that we can do in the future, but Gail can give you some of the specifics and numbers.
Oh, you want the numbers?
Yeah, whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really excited about the group numbers, school group numbers, because a lot of effort had gone into redoing and adding group activities. So we now have the land claim and survey activity and an Oregon Trail quest, and we redid our website, and just wanted the teachers to know that we're going to continue to change activities. And we added a lot of options for them, and in fact, one of the school groups is coming on December next week, and they are having Heartstrings do a 30-minute music presentation for them. So they can mix and match activities, and we can customize it. But our numbers already for next year, we have $15,581.50 on the books. That's for next year.
For next year.
And
Just not
this
awesome.
year, in 2014, we did $14,675. Now, the
For the whole year. We've
for
already
the
got-
whole year. So we're really doing more groups. What happened is, before we really opened, we had permission to do school groups only, if you remember that. Well, so I had someone, Paula Thacker, designed the group program, and she could only come certain days. So it was just, she could only take so many groups. And because we weren't open, we didn't grow. But now that we're open, I have someone that can do group presentations every day. And by the way, we're open every day. And so that's an advantage, too. That'll help our numbers eventually,
Yes.
too. So we can take groups every day and maybe multiple. So we're building up staff and building our programs so that, yes, we can go out and get more money and spend more
Yeah.
money.
Congratulations.
The last thing that I want to just mention is I think when I think about the process and the progress that we've made, we had to get physically improved, which we've been able to do, and I think we've turned a pretty big corner in that effort. At the same time, we had to improve our programming, because you can have a better building, but if you don't have a better program or an interesting program inside it, what good is the better building? And so those two things have happened. And I think the reason was critical that happened is when I look to the future, Oregon City is going to grow from a standpoint of tourists and visitors. And we just think about the mill project, the Blue Heron project. And everybody's talked about, gee, what if we had 1 million visitors a year? Well, that's really possible. I really believe that's possible. Now, that's a ways out. But even if it's 5 or 10 years out, that's going to be tomorrow. That's going to come very, very fast. And what if, just what if, we got 10% of those people to visit the museums? Not just the end of the trail, but the Clackamas, the Historical Society Museum, Ermitinger, Barclay House, McLaughlin, all of them. That's 100,000 visitors. And we're doing around 15 to 20,000. So that's 5 times more visitors than we did this year. We have to be ready for that because I think that's coming. And so it's incumbent upon us to have our act together, to each of us have our act together, but also then to work together because they are coming. And I think with this place we're at now, we're able to begin to think about that again and see how we can work together as a community and be ready for those kind of numbers and those tourists that are on their way. So, any questions that you have?
I think Commissioner Smith's on the docket.
Yeah, no questions, but I would echo what you just said, Dan. I think it's something that I hope very much that the next commission discusses, and we're working on a lot. We're having a lot of discussions within the heritage groups about tourism. The Oregon City Tourism Council has been having this discussion, how tourism plays into our economic development, and just kind of working forward. And I think we're in a better place in Oregon City in terms of that than we've been in a very, very long time, possibly even forever. So that's good.
Yeah.
And I think we just need to keep adding to that and keep working on that. I also just want to thank both of you so much. I did speak about, I think, some of the progress at the last meeting, just how impressed I am in really what's happened in the last 2 years. I think that to what this commission I think asked for was a strong partnership and really a strong investment in that building, because we knew opening that building was a risk in the sense that we didn't know how long we'd be able to keep it open because we didn't know how long it would keep standing. And so I think Clackamas Heritage Partners has been proactive in finding funds to put back into that building, and it seems like just yesterday we kind of talked about the siding and well, oh my gosh, how are we going to tackle this? And we're tackling it. And I'm kind of so impressed that that's in process and is not maybe as bad as we thought it was. And so I think that effort really means a lot to me. Really means a lot to show that we're all working together to keep that building open. And I hate to say this because I've been talking about the center a lot. Which I'm not sorry about that.
Thank you.
But every day, at school, all I get is questions about city stuff, constantly, from students and teachers and everybody. And I'm sad to say the last few weeks, anytime that I have mentioned the Interpretive Center, I've heard the response, oh, are they open still? Or have they reopened? I didn't know they reopened. So I think the commission and the city as a whole and citizens as a whole that are here tonight in this community, we need to keep reminding people that, yes, these buildings are open, not just the Interpretive Center, but the other museums in the community, because people know and they hear that we kind of have this back and forth where the funding is not the greatest and the hours sometimes aren't the greatest and go back and forth. But I think we really need to be advocating for the fact that these buildings are open, these museums are open, with the exception of the Ermitinger House, and some of the buildings have been cut back some hours, but we're working on it, I think, and kind of pushing forward to this future when we are having all these tourists come in. And I think we're on our way, and I think the view that we all have of this community and the mill site will force us to get our act together, and will force us to make sure that we are keeping these buildings open and that we are serving the visitors that are coming in, because they are coming.
I just want to say thank you for all that you have done. I think we had some real doubts there for a bit. We got that one report earlier on saying that the building was in trouble, probably needed to be torn down and redone or something,
Right.
which is completely
Right.
wrong, apparently. And we need to do it as a city. We've seen the National Park Service's funding cut off. McLaughlin House is only open 2 days a week.
Right.
And we've got to demonstrate that we are a big tourist draw and get that attention back to us. It's very critical we do so.
And I hope with our future and our future plans that we can get strong enough to help the other museums too, because it's not good enough that just we're open 7 days a week. Everybody needs to be, because that person comes in from Germany, Italy, wherever. It's nice to be able to pass them on to all the sites,
Absolutely.
the elevator. It's stronger together.
Part of the problem with the National Park Service is their policy is they have to have a professional there. We've demonstrated with the Stevens Crawford House and other museums. No, that's not necessary. Volunteers can do a very good job, but it's one of the things they're stuck with. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. You're
Thank
doing
you.
a great job.
And if after you read your report you have more questions, just let me know.
Okay,
will.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
This is a moment of celebration. Well, no, maybe that's not the way to put it. It's a moment of celebration of 26 years of service of our city attorney, Ed Sullivan, serving the city of Oregon City. And I believe our city manager is going to say something, and I'm sure many of us will have something else to say as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's correct. So after Ed, I'd like you to come on up and join me. We're going to try our best to embarrass you a little bit. And when I'm finished with my remarks, we're going to ask everybody that's worked with Ed over the years to take an opportunity.
I'm sure. I guess it's going to be on the back.
Just have to hold it closer. Okay. Where do you want me? Just stand right over here. But I think there's one more item here too. So tonight we celebrate Ed's career in Oregon City. As the mayor mentioned, Ed has been serving the city for 26 years, which in my opinion is one of the longest continuously serving city attorneys in the state. Ed's career goes all the way back 45 years when, and he's been a legend, of course, in land use, and everyone knows that. He also was starting his career at a time when Chevrolet still made a good Camaro. My favorite Camaro. And we were going to plan a little celebration tonight, but we didn't know how long the meeting was going to last. Craig? I'm just kidding. I was just trying to see if you were with us. And we didn't know how long we would go tonight and if Ed could stay, because he's got a Lubeck hearing in the morning. So we got you a little gift here. It's under $50, and it's a pint from the motherland, from the land of the Sullivans. And we appreciate your service, Ed. Also, I want to say a few words about what it's been like to work with Ed. Ed has been a rock for the city. I've been with the city about 4.5 years. Ed has given me not only good advice, but good counsel. He is tough when he needs to be, always thoughtful, and reserved when he needs to be. He gives us advice that not only keeps the city out of trouble, but it helps us govern better. And I've really appreciated that, Ed. Your wisdom has been very important to us. Shortly after I started in Oregon City, I knew something about Ed was different because as a new person to Oregon City, I was spending a little extra time working on the weekends. And one Saturday I called Ed, and he said, "Greetings from Istanbul." And about a month later I called him again on the weekend. He said, "Greetings from Crete." And so, but for an occasional sabbatical for travel, Ed, this would be his 623rd council meeting. So that's amazing. So Ed, without further ado, I know you said you didn't need any more plaques, but Nancy Ide assured me that this plaque was exceptionally beautiful, and I believe it is. And I want to present this to you. It says, presented to Edward J. Sullivan, City Attorney, with gratitude for 26 years of service as the City Attorney of the City of Oregon City, 1988 to 2014. Congratulations. Oh, and by the way, Ed's favorite restaurant, as everyone probably knows, is the Spaghetti Factory.
That's
and
right.
there's enough coupons in here, not bought with public funds, I don't think, that you can go there almost every day of the week for the next several weeks.
Go there yours. Just a couple of words. I don't want to take up much time. It's been my pleasure to serve the community, to serve this commission, to serve former commissions, to work with outstanding, exceptional staff, and to have a great time doing it. I asked Nancy to pull up the history of the city, or at least since I've been here. There have been 5 permanent managers that I've served under, and 6 mayors, and only 3 city recorders. All right, there's a good continuity there. I actually did start, and Nancy also sent me the minutes of the first meeting in which I served, February 3, 1988. So actually, this is 27 years, almost 28, doing the same thing. You would think I'd be smarter than that. Again, though, it's been my pleasure to be here. It's the whole panoply of things that can happen have happened here. All the adventures that a municipal lawyer could want have been here. Seen people come and go, mostly with a good time and a good experience. And I can't thank you all enough, can't thank the community enough. Thank you.
I think it was just probably about 9 months after you started working here that I actually moved here. We came back from overseas in '88 and '89 June. We bought some property here, and I remember seeing you, I think, for the first time with a group called the Friends of Mill Creek Canyon were protesting developments that were occurring, and the commission was talking about code, and we really couldn't stop it. And I recall you indicating, if there's an issue of a public hazard, yes, you can. The commissions didn't, but in any case, it was an experience for me when I was first here seeing you, and we've had a very good relation the whole time that I've been honored, really, to be with you.
I'll be happy to go next. Ed, you've always been there, I have to say. I've really appreciated your wisdom in your counsel. And you may not remember it, but you were in the attorney seat when I brought the petition before the city commission, which I think Mr. Fowler was the mayor at, asking that our neighborhood park be closed at 10 o'clock because there was so much noise going on and the cops couldn't do anything because there wasn't a curfew on public parks. So you were there and helped guide us through that process, and I was up there going, so I've matured a little bit then. I have my paper down.
I was in middle school when you started. But that's when I started coming to city commission meetings, probably high school at least. So I was looking at that list of city managers, and I remember a lot of that. My dad being a police officer in Oregon City for a long time, and my family, being here. Very political, and enjoyed going to city commission meetings at that time. And I just want to thank you for all of that service, and I've appreciated getting to know you better as a commissioner, and I think we can all say that we appreciate your humor, your sense of humor, and I think everything that David said is very much true. And so I wish you the best. And we were talking about the flags up here, and it sounds like a lot of the flags are places you haven't been to, and my hope is that you have time to start visiting the other places that you haven't been able to see yet. So congratulations, and good luck with everything that you do in the future.
Well, Ed, I want to tell you thank you for all of the lessons that you've given me. I've learned a lot from you in the short time I've been here. And I found that mostly if I listen more than I talk, I can learn a lot more. Also, I'm going to be really thankful that I can walk Harrison Street without being run over by anybody in white cars. So that's a little...
I almost did that, yes.
Yeah. So if you're not going to be driving the downtown streets so much, right? Anyway,
You feel safer?
Yeah. No, I'm really not. Anyway, I wish you well and in all that you do, and thank you so much for what you've given me.
Thank you.
I'm the newest on the commission. I just really appreciate how you put everything into layman terms for us that don't understand all the legal jargon, and really taking the time to explain it to us and the rest of the citizens too who are watching. I think that's really important so people understand the process. And thank you, and your humor too. It's great.
Well, and I'll tell you too. I've chatted with your wife, who's sitting out there in the audience, and we're gonna volunteer you for a few committees. So we're gonna get you out of the house.
Well, that's good. The only thing is, I don't think we can guarantee that we'll have somebody else substituting for him when he's not here.
Mayor, I also want to invite our staff, any of them who want to say anything, because some of them have spent lots of time with Ed over the years.
That's right.
Well, maybe I'll start since I'm one of the newer ones, if that works for you. So, Ed, I took a little different tack. I've worked for you for about 10 years since I've been here, but really only 2 years as a department director, a little over 2 years. So I asked Nancy and my assistant to check 109 commission reports, and I think just about every one of those you probably provided some level of comment. 674 phone calls, 926 emails. You can take those. I mean, I'm sure they're factual. I don't know. Probably about 90 commission meetings, and I tried to figure in about 15% of those meetings we might have had a beer afterwards, so maybe 13.5 beers afterwards. So I want to thank you for that. I also wanted to mention I really appreciated your subtle guidance in these meetings.
What also?
And I would say, usually that's in the form of, don't say anything, John. I really appreciate it. Out of all my years, I definitely respect your guidance and your help, and thank you for that.
Thanks, John.
And I'd like to add my comments as well. Ed, first of all, for those that may not know that are here in our chambers today, Ed has been to 120 countries in the world, is that right? And so these flags are just, as someone said earlier, representative of some of the countries he's been to and those that he's still wanting to go to. So we celebrate your world traveling experiences, and I wish I could come. But I would have to say that one of the highlights of my career has been the pleasure and opportunity of working with Ed Sullivan. With him here in the city as our city attorney. And so no matter where you were in the world, you were always attentive to our requests, to our emails, to our phone. And the trust that we had in you was earned by your immediate response. by the experience behind every piece of advice you gave us, your professional and thorough approach to every matter at hand, every subject, every item that was brought forward, and your genuine commitment to making Oregon City a better place. That's why we are all here, and we learned that from you. It's been a tremendous honor to have served with you, and I hope the citizens of this city truly know how fortunate they are to have had the watchful eye of the state's most respected land use attorney looking out for them these past 26 years. And thanks for attending all those 624 commission meetings. Let's see, times 3 hours on average, that's 1,872 hours of sitting in that chair over there.
Oh my goodness.
So here's to you, Ed. Thanks a million. Safe travels in all of your future travels. And let's see if I can do this right. Vole.
Right, that's right. Thank you very much, Nancy.
I'll go next because I'm going to be short. Nancy stole everything that I was going to say.
Yeah, I know, it's true.
No, Ed, I just want to say thank you from myself as well as my department for all the good work and all the good advice. I've been working with you here as a department head for about 10 years, and have really enjoyed our time. And since I've worked with you for 10 years and all those number of meetings and all that, I can't quite equate it quickly, but it's probably in the hundreds that I've heard you say, "It depends."
It depends, yes. The famous attorney words.
Well, I just want to say it's been such a great pleasure to know and work with Ed for all these years. I had the fortunate opportunity during grad school to have Ed as my law teacher under the MERP program at Portland State. So I met him early on as a student. I had his tutelage, his experience. One of the most intimidating finals, followed by a beer at McMinimans with the teacher, which is always great. And I passed. And then had the fortunate opportunity to be hired at Oregon City straight out of grad school and have Ed as our attorney. It was a little intimidating at first. It felt like you were going to the principal's office, but quickly learned. Just an amazing person to work with. Always very kind, generous with his time, with his thoughts. I feel so grateful to have had the opportunity to not only have you as a teacher and a mentor, but someone I could also call a friend. It's been amazingly 15 years and come a long way. And a lot of my growth has been because of my experiences with you. So I just want to say thank you. I wish you and your family the best, and I hope we'll certainly stay in touch.
We will. Thanks, Tony.
And Tony, I thought I saw your head in one of these pictures.
I used to be in the back row.
Yeah.
Just Nancy's calculation may be an under calculation. You add in executive meetings and all that kind. But I was thinking back when I first came on the commission and Dan Fowler was mayor, and there were several meetings that went from 7 to 2 a.m. in the morning. So that 3 hour average on the low side. Well, thank you so much, Ed. Yes, Dan?
Can I say something?
Well, Bob's on the Bob Mahoney.
Right, I don't know. He's on for President County. I know. Right, I'll call him.
So my name's Dan Holliday. I'm the mayor-elect of Oregon City. I started out, must have been 92, something like that, as a young city commissioner, almost about the same time you started your deal, Rocky. And Ed and I were at loggerheads at the very beginning because I was like this big gung-ho activist guy. I was going to come in and change the world, in 30 days, and everything was going to be different. And Ed was the patient old cow at the top of the hill, just pull. just giving me advice and saying, no. And, Scott spoiled my deal, but, 3 attorneys walk into a bar, okay? What happens next, Ed?
5 different opinions?
It depends. I can't count the number of times I heard that when I was on the city commission, and then after, watching on TV and all that. But we went to your retirement party a couple weeks ago, and we heard all of the amazing things you've done in your career. But conspicuously absent was your service to Oregon City. And I almost got up and took the microphone and just wanted to do it anyway, but I didn't want to break into the deal. But you have been a hugely important part of our city. And on the other side of the scale, all those meetings, all that time, you got paid for. So let's not forget about that. Thanks for all your service, Ed. We really appreciate it. And I am very disappointed that I'm not going to have the opportunity to work with you. But we have Old Man Winter back there.
Trying to accomplish some of the gravitas. It's the vain attempt.
And Ed has promised that he will take my phone call if I call. So I appreciate it. Thanks, Ed.
Thank you.
Bob, did you have something to say for Ed? Come on ahead.
I'm going to put my hat on. I'm going to speak real slow and use little words so the Army and the Navy can keep up. Now I'll take my hat off.
You left the Air Force out.
Oh, well, they know how to fly, and I don't. I'm going to be presumptuous and take it upon myself to represent every planning director that ever served since that young man served. He may not recall it. I certainly do. The only time I ever saw him falter was when I met him at St. Mike's going to Mass. And he looked at me, and he didn't know who I was. I knew who he was. The only time, I think he seriously considered leaving the church at that time. That's the only time I've ever seen him falter. Since that time, I was working at Portland. Since that time, shortly thereafter, I got another job out of Portland. But I don't think there's anything that in this state of Oregon pertaining to land use law that Ed doesn't have his fingerprints on one way or another. I'm going to introduce you to the but legal opinion. Now, the first legal opinion went to the courts and came out and gave planning in Oregon real credibility, was the Fasano decision, which labeled then planning commissions as quasi-judicial bodies and laid down some rules that they had to follow. Well, that gave us credibility. But then planning directors and every planner had to then write staff reports with findings and quasi-legal paraphernalia that we weren't really qualified to do. We knew planning, but we didn't know law. And so we really had to rely on city attorneys and stuff like that. And it was good because it elevated land use planning in Oregon, which led to urban growth boundaries and reserve areas and saved the Willamette Valley and things of that nature. And it just gets more complicated and more complicated as we go along, not because the principles of planning have changed, but the law has evolved because of case law and things that go beyond that and public opinion and this and that and the other thing. But Mr. Sullivan was right at the tip of the spear through the whole thing. And every planning director in the state of Oregon since that time, when he's come aboard, owes him a debt of gratitude. It really does. I don't want to put too much of an emphasis on it. Oh, by the way, Ed, one Irishman to another, I want to drink out of that bottle before you. But the rule was we'd sit up there and we'd pontificate and do what we had to do. And then we'd make a motion and then we could hear, yeah, but you can do that, but, and so we'd have to revise our motion or revise our thinking and stuff like that, and it went on and on and on. So I never did get my overhead sewer pipe through City Hall approved because it was the but rule. And so anyway, land use planning really does involve all of us because it deals with public health. And we're seeing it on TV now, what public health means. We're becoming a planet of refugees. 1 million here and 1 million there, and you put them all and you congregate them, and all of a sudden you find out you got sanitary problems, you got disease, you got how to feed them, how to do this, and it all has to do with placement of people and this and that. And we formulated that here in Oregon through case law and land use law, and he's always been there. He teaches it at Portland State, and anybody that comes out of that school is going to be imprinted with that, and they're going to go on and be city councilors, they're going to be volunteers, they're going to be planning commissioners, and what have you. And it's all because of his influence in some way, shape, or form in that. And I think now you've gotten all this pontification from the worst planning director the state of Oregon's ever seen. Okay.
Thank you. I have one question for Ed, if I may. When you came in, did you come working with a legal firm, or did you come in on your own?
I was with the firm all the time.
So nobody ever saw on your resume that you represented the Rajneeshis.
But it was effective.
That was good.
The response to that is, yeah, but.
Yeah, but you'd rather on his side than on your side than the Rajneeshis if they come to town.
Let me just recognize.
Sure.
Both looked at you, Bob.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, I'd also like to recognize my spouse, my soulmate,
Yes.
and my best friend, Patty. If you'd stand.
Well, I can tell you that he loved being here.
That's
good.
great.
Even on the late nights.
Yeah.
He'd be going out for a drink with somebody else.
Well, we should also thank you and your family because we did take time away from you guys, and so thank you.
Well, you were a good one.
With that, we'll go to regular citizens' comments for things that are not in the agenda. Bob Mahoney, you're finished, right? You're finished? You're not coming back up or anything? Okay, good. Well, in that case, we'll go on to adoption of the agenda. Anything anybody wants pulled from the agenda, from the consent agenda? Hearing not, we'll go ahead into our public hearings. General business is the second reading of ordinance 141018, and I'll go ahead and that's the changes to the pavement maintenance utility fee of Oregon City's municipal code, and go over to initially to John Lewis.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to get through this relatively quickly. I know there's some people in the audience who want to speak, so I'll go through the staff report rather quickly, but to cut to the chase, we're asking you to approve the second reading of Ordinance 14-1018 and adopt the changes to the pavement maintenance utility fee ordinance of Oregon City's Municipal Code, Chapter 1330. So, in 2008, actually May of 2008, Ordinance 08-1007 was successfully adopted. The City Commission at that time adopted the ordinance, and we've literally been paving the way for improved quality of life for all who walk and bike and drive in Oregon City under that ordinance. And really, we've been managing that ordinance and implementing that ordinance in the same way for the last 6 years. And recently, it was brought to our attention that we had some ambiguity in that original ordinance, and in our review of that, we thought, well, we should probably clean that up to make sure it's clear, what our intent and what the original intent of that ordinance might have been. So we have 3 items that are changing in this ordinance in the second reading, and I know it's the second reading, so you've studied the changes, but I'll just go over them for the listening audience. But the easy change is the ordinance lists Institute of Transportation Engineers Manual, the 7th edition, and there's now the 9th edition, so we're including that change. The other change is we think the point that's been made about ambiguity in our ordinance and code is the term, a loophole term that's considered parcel. To be honest with you, the city parcel's kind of a surveyor's term that the city mostly relies on tax lots. And so this term parcel, when brought to our attention and how that might impact the code, made some sense to us. So we decided we should change that term from parcel to property to align with how the intent of the code was. And so we're making that change. And the other one is to just better deal with the fact that we've got various land uses on different properties and so in different buildings. So we're trying to clarify how that happens in the code. So we don't see these as major changes, but we see them as changes that probably make sense to happen as we're doing a code change right now. So that's what we're asking you to do. I think with that, there's been some other testimony that's been before you. I think it's been addressed in the code. I'm prepared to speak before you with other concerns if they're brought up in the public testimony, but I'll kind of reserve that until after that public testimony. So with that, I'm complete.
Any comments for the commission before I call for people from the audience to speak? I have Greg Danielson and Chip Hudson. Would you please come forward? Identify yourself by name and Oregon City resident or business.
And I should clarify, I did have a conversation with Mr. Danielson this morning, and Mr. Sullivan said I don't have to disclose that, but I want to be truthful about things.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Neely, City Commissioners. Good evening. I'm Chip Hudson with Lane Powell. I'm appearing here on behalf of Hilltop Mall and the Danielson family. First, we want to thank the Commissioner for holding this matter over for the second reading. With me tonight are Craig Danielson and Chris Bremer of Kittleson and Associates. We've submitted written testimony for each. We're proposing that Mr. Danielson go first to describe his family's concern with the proposed amendments and the way that they may impact shopping center type properties, followed by Mr. Bremer, who will address some of the transportation engineering analysis that might inform an amendment to the PMUF ordinance. And that would be followed by my much shorter remarks just about the particular language that you're looking at in the proposed amendment. With that summary, I'd like to introduce Craig and let him take over.
Mayor Neely, City Commissioners, good evening. I'm Craig Danielson, and with my sister, we're the managers of Hilltop Mall. First, we want to thank the Commission for holding this matter over for tonight for a second reading. Having had the opportunity to listen to the staff's presentation at the first reading and the comments and questions that some of you had, I felt it was important for me to explain from our perspective how we got to this point and why we're raising these concerns. I have attempted to address these issues in my written testimony, but I'd like to cover the highlights. We believe that now how these amendments are addressed is critical to the transparency and perception of fairness that underlines the success of the Transportation Utility Fee, or PIMA, program. Because we have concluded that our attempt to seek judicial review of the staff's determination with respect to our property has undermined what should be an open public process and made it more difficult to communicate our larger concerns with the way in which these amendments impact shopping centers, we have elected to dismiss that petition. We support the PMUF and believe that it is a good program. We think it enjoys broad support because of the way in which it was created. I had the privilege to serve on the Stakeholder Citizen Advisory Committee and work on the creation of the Transportation or Pavement Maintenance Utility Fee in 2007-2008. Working with consultants, the committee studied a number of issues, and without going into great detail, I recall a few. We recommended adoption of a framework of classifications suggested by the Institute of Transportation Engineers, Generation Manual, then in its 7th edition. While no system was perfect, there was a general acceptance that provide an objective, commonly recognized way of measuring the impact of different businesses and users in the public transportation system. Using the ITE manual, business properties could be sorted into different trip generation bins according to a series of uses defined by the ITE code designations. With respect to shopping centers, the desirability of having a single bill to go to the center for all the businesses included was discussed, and you could see that in the agenda packet provided. Hilltop Mall was one of those identified as a top user, together with several other local shopping centers. Under each of the scenarios discussed, it was always classified ITE code 820 as a shopping center, and we included that. After the ordinance was enacted in 2008, our family continued to operate the grocery store in the center, at that time Danielson's Fresh Marketplace. After examining our initial payment billing, I discovered that the store was being classified as a standalone supermarket. And that's ITE code 850, bin 3, rather than as part of the shopping center. When I brought this to the attention of Bob Cullison at the city, this was corrected to ITE code 820 for shopping centers. Later, when Safeway came in and the tenant was billed directly, but my understanding from recent discussions with the city staff that ITE code 820 continued to apply. Hilltop Mall continued to pay monthly billings for payment maintenance fees, and it was my assumption that the entire shopping center was billed consistently under 820. Excuse me. The city utility invoices simply include a line and amount for the payment maintenance fee and do not indicate the ITE classification or bin assignment, and I included copies in the tabs. Normally, we do not see the bills that go to the separately utility accounts of our tenants each month, and when we do, we don't have any reason to scrutinize the payment maintenance charge. Unless one takes the time to compare and calculate the line item amounts or seek additional information, there's no way to understand that based on the staff decision implying ordinances, different businesses within the same shopping center are being assigned to a different ITE code. This was true to us, and I expect for other people. Excuse me. As city staff is aware, I did not realize that this was happening at the Hilltop Mall Shopping Center until December 2013, when we noticed some seemingly inconsistent amounts charged on different utility accounts in the course of a review of our common area charges within the center, and sought more information. In the months that followed, we attempted to work with Mr. Lewis and the city staff to understand Hilltop Mall and its tenants were being billed, and request that all of Hilltop Mall be classified as a shopping center under Code 820. That classification is signed in the ITE manual bin 2, resulting in a lower average trip or ADT measurement, and therefore lower payment maintenance fees. I understand that this is because the ITE classification system attempts to incorporate adjustments for the combined or internal trips that occur when different businesses are combined into a shopping center, and some customers visit one or more businesses while traveling to the center via a single trip on the public roads. This makes logical sense. One would expect that a grocery store, barbershop, restaurant, or bank within a shopping center would have these kind of internal trips where the same uses operating as a standalone business would not. While the city staff may be sincere in the belief that classifying Hilltop Mall as a shopping center results in fees that are too low, we do not understand their approach does anything to take into account this commonly recognized aspect of the ITE manual methodology as considered by the Citizens Advisory Committee and adopted by the Commission in the city's code. As I understand it, the combined or internal trip factor is separate and not accounted for by other factors mentioned by the staff, such as pass-by. In addition, as we read the code, it clearly states that each parcel should be assigned one bin, and we think the ITE code 820 for shopping centers is the only logical bin for Hilltop based on the description incorporated in the code. Can I keep going on time-wise? Okay.
We've got it written. We got the written testimony here.
Okay. We don't think this language is ambiguous. It makes sense to re-examine the code and to change it, but that should be thoroughly and deliberate process that involves stakeholders' input. And until the code is amended, I believe strongly that the staff should apply the code as written. If the staff finds that its practices are at odds with the code, then it should revise the practice, and the code can be amended in a normal, careful public process that allows for the possibility the staff's recommendation may be rejected or modified in some respect. Simply put, we believe that the staff should follow the code and not the other way around. The proposed amendment does more than eliminate the term parcel with a new term property, which, unlike parcel, is not defined. It also directs staff to apply each business type, another undefined term, to an appropriate bin. The amendment seems designed to negate the definition of shopping centers as an ITE classification, but it doesn't explicitly do away with the classification or give staff any real guidance on how far to go into that direction. No code is ever perfect in defining uniform standards, but these amendments seem designed to avoid uniform standards and simply leave all the determination to staff. They will make it hard for anyone, including the courts, to hold staff accountable for compliance with any standard. We recognize that the ITE manual relied upon by the advisory committee in 2007 has been revised, and there may be new information to consider in redefining some code provisions. Perhaps there is a scientific case to be made that a shopping center of Hilltop size should be given a higher or lower classification than Bin 2, or that other adjustments should be made. We welcome the opportunity to participate in the process. At the same time, we believe that the legislative process must be open and transparent. To initiate legislative based on a one-sided presentation in executive session and then revise the code without meaningful discussion or input from stakeholders seems destructive to the public confidence and business community's support of the PIMA as enjoyed now. We believe that any revision of the code provision governing the PIMA should be, as a primary objective, promoting an assessment system that is objective and easily understood and applied. The more the system depends on a case-by-case determination, the more it will consume staff time and resources and increase the risk that however hard staff tries, those on the losing end of the staff determination will feel that they have not been fairly treated and that the code has become whatever staff says at a given time. One of the primary reasons for my dissatisfaction with the existing practice, as I experienced over the past year, is its subjectivity and lack of reference to a clear standard defined in the code. As noted, the staff has simply ignored the code's definition of parcel. Staff has interpreted a shopping center under ITE Code 820 to apply only to shopping centers with shared walls. Not only is staff's interpretation directly contradicted by the code's definition of parcel, but the shared wall concept it proposes is not part of the ITE code descriptions for shopping centers, which focuses instead on the features that promote combined internal trips and appear to include the possibility of separate buildings. And then it's stated what it is, may include non-merchandising facilities such as office buildings, movie theaters, restaurants, post offices, and that's the description of a shopping center. ITE Code 820 description, which I just mentioned. In 2008, staff understood that the grocery store was part of the Hilltop Mall shopping center. Today, staff would prefer it to treat it along with the movie theater, banks, restaurants located within the same site and sharing the same internal roadways and parking as if they were standalone businesses with no internal trips. In making this interpretative change, however, staff has not undertaken any physically shared scientific study or explain the rationale for ignoring the impact of internal trips. There needs to be some uniform standard that does account for internal trips in some way. It is not a sufficient answer to say if a property owner is dissatisfied, they may commission a traffic study, as that cost, like the cost of an appeal to the circuit court, can be prohibitive. What matters much more than the amount involved is the perception that some objective standard is applied. We believe that the amendment proposed are not a good recipe for a successful and supportive utility fee. But even if you feel we were wrong, we hope you will see that the issue deserves more discussion and community input and defer a second reading to allow for a reasonable legislative process. Thank you very much.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Chris Bramer. I'm a professional engineer with Kittleson and Associates, and I wanted to just provide some brief remarks. You should have in your materials a letter from me dated December 1st. I wanted to direct you to the bottom of page 2. There's a little map that just illustrates conceptually how pass-by, diverted, primary, and internal trips work. And when we're preparing trip generation estimates, both for traffic studies and for the pavement maintenance fee in this case, we look at both the number of trips that are generated as well as the type of trip. You're trying to get through this maintenance fee the wear and tear on the system that's associated with trips with each business. And the ordinance as it exists today accounts for pass-by trips and diverted link trips. I think that's very appropriate. The change that's proposed in moving to a business-by-business assessment, in my opinion, does neglect to account for internal trips. The ordinance does not account for internal trips today, and there's not currently a proposal to do so. Those internal trips within a shopping center environment, if we think of Hilltop, could be a parent taking their children to the cinema. They drop the kids off, maybe they go get gas for their car while they're there, the kids walk over and get dinner or go get candy. There's interaction between businesses where those trips are happening, but they're not happening on the public street system, and so not having wear and tear there. I think everyone would agree that you want a code and a system that is fair and objective. And right now, the piece that I see missing in this change is the ability to account for internal trips. As you've heard in part, the shopping center land use within ITE does account for internalization, but by going to a business-to-business assessment, you may no longer be able to capture that as well. From a process perspective, the ordinance does allow for an appeal on an individual basis. A business could come in and appeal their rate and make an argument for internal trips or different trip rates. If you're a standalone business with one driveway, it's pretty straightforward. You put a traffic counter across the driveway, collect 2 or 3 days of data, and you know how many trips you're putting in and out, and then you would do some customer surveys to figure out how many were passed by, how many were diverted. With a shopping center, if you think particularly of Hilltop, there are multiple ways in and out of the site. So you've got to cordon off the site and figure out how do you keep track of each trip in and out. There's also public streets where people are driving through the campus, if you will, and not stopping. Danielson Drive, Colton Place, there are people using both roads, whether it's for cut-through, get to the other side of town, take the back stop out of the police station and come over. Each of those trips is happening, but it's not necessarily associated with anything for the actual center. So for a business to actually collect data and understand how many trips are coming to that business, you would have to basically set up cameras or people before the start of the day so that you could see the employees coming in and then the customers, monitor that traffic all the way through the day till after close, to after the end of the departure of the employees. And to do that is a very labor-intensive process. We were asked by the owners what would it cost for us to go do that, because initially they were interested in, well, let's just go get the data. It's on the order, depending on the number of days and how exactly you do it. You could be spending $15,000 to $20,000 to go do the data collection in the customer surveys and all the numbers to do this, which frankly doesn't pencil out for any kind of savings that you would get. So that has some practical considerations for your larger shopping centers and institutions. I think my point at the end of this is just to be aware that there may be some unintended consequences. It certainly applies to shopping center, multiple tenant businesses such as Hilltop, but also campus settings. If you think of a bookstore or a place to eat at the community college, are those now going to be charged separately when really they're probably serving the students on the campus and not something where the average public person is driving in? Same thing with a hospital. If there's a pharmacy at the hospital or a gift shop, are those going to be charged independently? You know, I'm not trying to tell you how to do this, but all I'd ask is that you consider that perhaps internal trips should be accounted for, and recognize that there's data now readily available to do that. ITE, the Trip Generation 9th edition, has new internal trip data. There's some national research that's out that specifically accounts for trips between different uses, and you could certainly set up different levels of shopping centers as well, accounting for different size centers. So with that, I'll conclude my remarks, and thank you for your time.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. For the record, again, Chip Hudson from Lane Powell. Mayor Neely, City Commissioners, my remarks are really just focused on the language that you're looking at in this proposed amendment. And we see really three things. We don't have any issue at all with changing from the 7th edition to the 9th edition of the ITE manual. But there are two definitional terms and then also a direction to staff. First there's the replacement of parcel with property. And for the record, we don't consider that the current definition is at all ambiguous. We think that anyone reading, and you could just go to the red line for the amendments to see this, there is a very clear definition of parcel, and I suspect that clarity may be there precisely to make sure that there is a way to determine what parcel means. Now, whether that definition is the best definition to use, whether it should be amended, that's a different question, but the amendments that are before you now would simply replace it with an undefined term, property. And it's not clear whether property is intended to mean utility account or tax lot or leasehold interest or commercial premises. I mean, it could be any of those things. And at this point, that is one of the things that staff will be required to determine case by case. It seems to us that with a normal sort of process in time, one could come up with a definition that is more workable, much as the parcel definition was, simply in terms of language precision. And it would make this a more objective standard so that at the end of that process with stakeholder input, everyone would feel like they know what they're getting. And I'm sure not everyone would agree with it, but there would be a process and it would be fairly clear. And you would minimize the number of times that staff would have to make a judgment call, which we think is a desirable thing in considering amendments. The second term is the use of the business type, and that too is not really defined. You can think of what level you want to go down to. I mean, are you going to look at hair salon, pet store, bookstore, or are you going to say, well, that's just all commercial retail, but if it's a grocery store, we'll put it in a different category. You could track that back perhaps to ITE categories, but the current amendment doesn't do any of that. It simply creates this undefined term of a business type. And then third, what I consider really the substantive issue that we feel needs to be addressed is the whole concept of internal trips, because the direction to staff to apply properties and business types to particular bins is really sort of inherently at odds with the IT classification for properties for shopping centers, which assume multiple different kinds of business types that create a public benefit because they create internal trips. If we take Hilltop Mall as an example, you have two streets running through that are privately maintained. So that's 100% of that expense is borne by the property. Although someone driving on the street would see a sign for Coulter and they would think of it as a public street. And in fact, it's to some extent used to get from one street to another through the center or to the police station. And you also have a large amount of parking available. And those kinds of shopping center investments are what create the public benefit of the shared trip, or the internal trip. As the code stands now, the only thing that captures some of that is the Bin 2 designation for shopping center. I will confess, I didn't know much about this 3 weeks ago. And when I looked at your code and I saw the classification for IT shopping center, 820 Bin 2, and I saw Bin 2, like, golly, a shopping center, Bin 2, that seems too low. And I almost feel that that's the bias that staff is starting with as well. But in fact, the more I learned about it, the more, without being a traffic engineer myself, it seems obvious to me that there is an internal trip factor that's captured that explains why it is bin 2. And again, we're not arguing that it necessarily, on a reevaluation should be bin 2 or bin 3, or if you go with the type of approach that you're envisioning, where you maybe just really try to drill down to particular businesses, whether maybe there's some other factor that could be applied. But surely that should be part of some kind of objective further work to create a code explanation, rather than dumping all of that on staff to determine. So with those remarks, I've just concluded by renewing our request that you defer a second reading to allow for a more deliberate process. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Sue Stein and Graham Peterson.
Thank you for your consideration in speaking with us today. I'm Sue Stein. I'm with Stein Oil. And as somebody that's been involved in the community with Main Street and seeing some of the things that you've tackled and some of the other commission issues, I would just like to also ask that you would consider the seriousness of this and get more information and defer the second reading of this ordinance 14018. It only came to my attention several days ago. I'm not well read on it, I would tell you that. But I would say that it is really critical in moving forward with development, and the little involvement I've had in the last 3-4 years, other than being involved in the city for 35 years and running a business, that I can see that when you do things, it's really imperative that you do them with clarity and you do them with communication, and that you allow the process that exists so that you do not have some of the missteps that have happened in the past, because this city is really moving forward with Main Street, Oregon City, and some other issues and development, and you have 2 major developments you're looking at, and it will be imperative to the success of a developer and anyone coming in that the statutes be an open process and the businesses are able to evaluate it. And all I would suggest, as a representative of a business and being a volunteer in this community, and I'm now on the Community College Foundation Board, we are growing and we are being recognized as a major force, and we are a great community. And I would like to see that we continue forward with this process, and there are good people representing the city. And all I would ask is that you could please take this as a city commission to have the staff review with TAC, the Transportation Advisory Committee that's already set up, and have more open discussion. And again, I just would be really hopeful as a citizen and a business person and a volunteer that you might be able to defer the second reading tonight until there was more clarification. Thank you.
Graham Peterson, Oregon City. So I think if I had to boil down, kind of my biggest concern is that when I read this, I don't see a area for internal trips to be credited for a place like Hilltop Mall or Berry Hill, any of Southridge, and that just doesn't sit right to me, because internal trips do exist and there needs to be some sort of consideration for that. So what I would say is there needs to be some sort of process to look at how you can accomplish that. And this change, in my mind, eliminates internal trips altogether for properties like that. So that's what I would ask of you tonight, and thank you.
Before you go,
Mm-hmm.
the internal trip, I was trying to look, and it's not struck out anywhere, and I don't know if it's there. Is your reference to this dealing with internal trips as a definition of parcel?
No, it's more individual business types that that opens the door for you to when you're putting each business type into an individual bin. Those separate bins don't account for internal.
The reason I'm asking this, I mean, staff's going to respond, but the reason I'm asking this question, many of the concerns that you have are not altered at all in this presentation. The bin definition is there. The internal trip is not specifically, I don't see, referred to here. So many of the concerns that you have to do in a broader aspect, perhaps, than what we're talking about here. You're probably talking about taking a look at the overall ordinance in more detail at a different point.
Well, yeah. So
yeah.
I guess what I see there is I don't see it. I see the potential to not credit internal trips, and I see it by having a process you can look at that more deeply and come up with something that does make sense. And I just don't see the change of or the adding of the ability to parcel out individual business types as accounting for that.
Yeah, and that was there before. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. William Gifford and Amber Holbeck, please. Usually I take them in the order that they bring their card up, but since you probably represent two different business groups, you can be a gentleman. I'll accept it. Amber?
Does it mean I'm going first? Yes, ma'am.
No, you got to ask me, not him. Yes, you may go
Mayor
first.
Neely, I thought you had just gotten used to seeing the William and Amber show, and so
yes.
Commissioners, Mayor Neely, I'm Amber Holbeck. I do serve as the director for the Oregon City Chamber, and this evening on this item, I just simply have a couple questions, which you folks may choose to direct back to staff, and I'm just trying to understand. Back in the days of the TFSCC, the task force that looked at this, that developed the PMUF and the system, were internal trip factors on the table as an option to consider or
It wasn't
explore?
discussed, no.
It was not discussed?
No.
Okay. So, thank you. Appreciate that. And then the other question I had, let's see, the proposed changes, and this is citing John Lewis's memo. The proposed changes result in little to no changes to the city's existing customer accounts for PMUF. And so with regard to the existing shopping centers, how they're categorized currently, has there been any work to sort those out and how those might change?
Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, I think you need to.
Write them all down and then answer at the end?
Yeah, how about if I answer at the end?
Yeah. Yeah.
So repeat the question, though.
The second question? Okay. So with regard to, because there's a change in shopping centers, or a proposed change to shopping centers, as I understand, and they would be, for instance, when they fall into different bins, they would then, when a particular property includes multiple business types, the rate will be established based on charging each business type in their appropriate bin. So what I was wondering, if staff has had an opportunity then to take a look at the shopping centers that are listed very nicely here, and see what the possible impact will be there in these bins. And if so, how is that then communicated to those shopping center managers, et cetera?
answer at the end. No.
All right. Thank you, and that's all.
Mr. Garrett, before you proceed, I didn't want to imply that I had anything against chivalry. I always learned it was age before beauty. Go ahead. In terms of your order that you came in.
Wait a minute now.
Go ahead. It's obviously beauty
Mayor
before
Neely,
age.
I'm on a planning team to help recognize your years of service to the city.
My understanding, it was going to be a complete roast, and I'm just giving you material.
Fair enough. Would you like to
Go ahead.
first?
Mr. Mayor, City Commissioners, my name is William Gifford, and I live in Oregon City. I'm going to tell you a quick Sufi story. If you're not familiar with Sufi tales, I can tell you about that some other time. The judge was hearing a case, and the plaintiff came and presented his case to the judge. The judge listened very carefully and said, "You're right." And the bailiff said, "Your Honor, you haven't heard the defense." He says, "Oh, all right, bring the defense up." He listened to the defense's case, and he said, "You're right." And the bailiff came up and said, "Your Honor," he says, "they both can't be right." The judge thought about it and said, "You're right." And there's a lot of levels to that.
You're
yeah,
right.
exactly so. And I've been listening to this issue about the PMUF back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And I frankly think that everybody is right here, and it's an awkward situation. What the new piece of news that I just heard tonight was that the lawsuit was dropped.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct.
Yes, it is.
And I understood that the urgency for the second reading, actually last time it was both first and second readings, was in part precipitated by that lawsuit.
Mm-mm.
If that's not the case anymore,
Oh, but it wasn't before either.
then I'm just curious about the urgency for getting this done. And if there isn't an urgency, I would certainly suggest that this, and certainly any future cases that don't have to do with beyond just cosmetic changes to the PMUF ordinance, should be run through a little more process than has been done through for this particular change. That being said, I imagine my suspicion is your minds are already made up.
I don't know. You're right. So
Don't get smart with me.
I don't have very many meetings left. I'm being smart with you.
I guess the point is, it depends, right? I guess the point is that if it's possible to hold it over, I think that would set a good example for future changes, if any, that are necessary.
But the point is, a lot of the things that almost all the things that have been brought forward aren't dealt with at all in the changes. That doesn't say that the ordinance shouldn't be changed, but they were the things that are concerns that were within the unchanged ordinance. And I'll let staff talk about why the change was necessary.
I'm not trying to get into a discourse with you necessarily, other than to make the point that an open and clear process would involve the use of an advisory committee that
I
you've
agree,
already
and
appointed.
I think the next commission may wish to look at this ordinance in its entirety.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
Those are my comments.
Thank you.
Good.
You're right. Everybody's right. Let's
With
go
that-
home.
With that, John, do you
Well,
want to?
again, I see there's a couple of tracks. There's kind of the legal track, which I'd like Bill or Ed to take on, and then maybe after that I'll take on all the detail, or as many details as we
You're
need
right.
to here. So I
love it.
I have lots to say, but I want to do it in short order.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, you have a great deal of discretion tonight in how you handle this matter. The words parcel or lot or use or whatever term is used, all are rife with ambiguity. They all require some judgment in their application. You're never going to get away from that except with mathematical models, which don't apply here. Okay? So there's a judgment that John eventually will have to make over whether or not a particular assignment is correct or not. But these inexact terms are handled in our administrative law system through a series of dialogues by appeals, by people coming up to the mic and saying that they think it's unfair or that it should be changed, as you've heard tonight, by precedent, by lawsuits. And what you've done here is to look at one of two kinds of ways of revising an ordinance. This is a short-term issue, all right? It relates to an immediate problem that was raised in a particular lawsuit, now dismissed, or will be dismissed shortly, but it may be raised by others who could take that same rationale. It's up to you if you want to set this over or if you want to make that fix now, okay? The longer-term issues that you've heard, particularly internal traffic, these are addressed more or less by committees, by longer-range looks at things, and by revisions to the ordinance. I wasn't aware that it was an internal traffic problem here until tonight. We've never had an appeal on it. Okay? So the only thing that has come up most recently is that there's this ambiguity, now denied that it's ambiguous, over the word parcel. If you want to do the fix, you're still going to have John having to make judgment calls. And there's a process for dealing with that, through appeals, through writs of review, if it comes down to that. And if you're going to take a look at the whole policy of the ordinance, the best thing to do is to refer that out to a committee and have them look at it in depth and bring it back to you. So you've got the long and the short range issues to deal with tonight, and it is not unlawful to hold it over. It's not unlawful to act tonight. It's purely within your discretion.
Okay, so there's...
Can I just ask you a question, please? The traffic person, Kettle and Sons?
Kittleson.
Yep. They were the original group that came before us and worked with us on this, correct?
Let's see, came before us. What do you mean?
At the TAC meeting, I'm sorry. They were the ones that helped us through this process.
No, that was a different traffic engineer.
That was a different what?
Different traffic engineer. We use
different company
different
altogether?
company.
Yes.
Different
Okay.
company.
And we've used Kettleson for other things.
Yes. Yes. And I thought they were the ones that helped us through the whole thing.
No,
Okay.
we Carl Springer with DKS was
the original. Okay.
consultant.
Thank you.
That also illustrates the ambiguity, too.
Yeah,
that different
absolutely.
engineers have different professional judgments.
Well, just like I said last time, you put 9 attorneys in the room and ask each one of them what a parcel and what property stands for, they're going to be all different.
No, they're actually all going to say the same. It depends.
Depends. Well, but.
So maybe I'll address the internal trip factor, because I think it is it's a good suggestion, a little out of sync with where we're at with this particular appeal. So we would have liked to have seen that. We advocated for that with Mr. Danielson early on, that we look at traffic studies. In fact, Chris and Craig put together a traffic study for the theater building, which we considered and resolved with a decision that lowered their trip rate, or will lower their trip rate. So, internal trip factors isn't part of the ordinance. Staff doesn't necessarily have the authority to make sweeping changes about shopping centers and internal trip rates. That may make some sense. But the ITE manual has a full chapter on multi-use properties, and they define multi-use properties different than a shopping center, because they see the shopping center is defined in the ITE code. It's got its land use category, but multi-use is a little different, where you have living and work. But they have a whole chapter dedicated to that, and there's some merit to the fact that some of these properties with multiple types of businesses on them are going to have internal trips. So I would say that's worth discussion and something that we can consider. I would also say that your ordinance is very generous with regard to the actual trips versus what we get down to in terms of assigned trips for a particular business. So I know in 2008 when we actually adopted the ordinance, and before that 2007 when we were talking about it in the committee level, there was also the factor, which is lots of times the case, which is to simplify these ordinances in a way that staff aren't necessarily going to be tripping up over all the details of a more complicated ordinance, especially when we have to deal with it on such a large scale as we were doing in 2008. So that was one of the other considerations. I was staffing the decision in 2008. I just don't recall the internal trip factor having much discussion. It was always passed by trip factors, which is included in, and then the average daily trips, and then these bin factors, which kind of reduces it even further. So that's what I'll say about internal trip factors. The other thing I wanted to mention was throughout this, it's been suggested that staff is acting and implementing the ordinance differently than what was discussed with the Citizen Committee and at the Commission at that time. And I know this information isn't available on the screen, but we did put together a memo kind of in response to some of the information that Craig provided in his testimony and Chris provided in his letter. And so one of the things that I just wanted to note is there's a chart that has been referenced in some of the correspondence that you've received about the top. It's called the, let me find it here, projected top users, right? In 2007 and early 2008, we provided that information to the committee to show, the sampling of some of the larger payments that were going to be collected through this ordinance. And Danielson's was on that list. And in that list, Danielson's there was also unit numbers, a square footage that was included in that. And at the time, Danielson's was 97.12, which was 97,000 square feet, basically. And that number is what was classified as shopping center. That number has since gone up because of remodeling, but it's still representative of what Craig has on the Hilltop property, which is now it's gone up to 114,000. So my point is that, yes, there was a listing Danielson Shopping Center that showed part of his unit, but it was only a portion. And other information that we provided in similar graphics that we've shared with the Citizen Committee. We also included McDonald's on his particular parcel, and we included examples from other shopping centers like Fred Meyer and the Oregon City Shopping Center, and we showed places like Starbucks and Sherry's and the fuel station at Fred Meyer. All of those examples, which we were really just trying to, we had a long working list, which I can't say for sure how much of that we shared with the committee, but it was available, so we could have, or maybe even did share that long citywide list of all the different land uses and properties that we were, and buildings and businesses that were going to be, and specifics on what their bills would be. We shared that with the committee. So to me, I get that Craig saw that one name, Danielson's, and applied that to his whole property, but in reality, we were specific about sharing the unit amount, which is what we're still today charging as, or acknowledging as shopping center for the Danielson Hilltop properties. So I just want to make sure that's clear. We didn't change anything from what was discussed at the committee. It's always been because the city didn't want to create a whole new billing methodology, and we have utility accounts, right? So every water meter that we have has an account associated with it, a property owner or business owner, and we all agreed that rather than create a whole new methodology for how we would distribute bills and how we would do that, we would focus our daily trips specific to that utility account. And and I don't want to make this about Danielson's, but it kind of is about Danielson's. In their case, they've got 11 different accounts on their property, water meters on their property. And so we use each one of those accounts to specifically assign a land use associated with that. And yeah, at the time, we didn't look hard at how many parcels or tax lots, or we've always focused this on a building and a utility account. And so, in the Danielson Hilltop Mall property, we've got 11 different assigned daily trips for each one of those accounts. And in this case, two-thirds of the buildings on Danielson property are, or two-thirds of the units on Danielson property are shopping center. There's the outlying other businesses that are on the Danielson property that we've assigned a daily rate appropriate for their use. Okay, so I want to make that clear as well. Let's see. Talked a lot about shared wall. I've shared some information about how the shared wall isn't necessarily our threshold. It just turns out that we've got several properties. I think 13 different properties that are under the shopping center designation. Most of them are the larger facilities like Weimart and Goodwill and some of the other Trails End Marketplace. So we've got several of those. Some of them do happen to be shared use, but they've got other buildings on their site. So we're consistently looking at the meter and the utility account and assigning a land use based on the best use of that. It's nothing in this that's proposing to change that. For instance, if there's 20 businesses on one account, we're not suggesting we go in and associate each of those businesses with a different, land use for a blended rate. We're not proposing that, and that's never been the way we've implemented it. We do see some potential for multi-use. So, for instance, if you have a two-story building and you've got a restaurant on one level and an apartment up above, we like the flexibility of being able to help that property with that kind of different designation. We'd rather do that than charge the whole building for a restaurant use. So we think there's some value in making this adjustment in the favorable way for the property owners, and we think we have a history of making those kind of decisions that are favorable for them. Let's see. I want to discuss Amber's question, which was proposed change to the shopping center. Have we looked at other shopping centers? We're not proposing to change, where'd Amber go? We're not proposing to change any of the shopping centers from what we're doing today. We're looking to clarify that based on a specific example that we felt, well, maybe we need some more clarification on. So we've looked at the other shopping centers for consistency and implementation. That's most critical to me, because as staff implements this, being consistent, have a record of consistency is that most important. I don't want to, so that's imperative to me. And so we've only looked at these shopping centers for consistency with what we've done with Craig's property and other properties like it. We found that we have been. So we're not proposing changes. We're not proposing changes in the bills. We're not. We are doing an audit, and that's part of the code change. And we are looking for things more like mistakes, I would say, than changes to policy. That was done in 2008, and we want to get through and make sure and clean that up. But we're not proposing taking an account and blending it in the way that I think we've heard tonight. There's this impression that we're proposing to do.
Yeah, I have Commissioner Smith coming on next, but I want to make what I've always stood on this thing clear. What we're calling a property is the place that has a water meter. We charge our utilities through water meters, and our billing for payment utility fee goes on the utility bill. I have always taken this to be how we handle our bookkeeping. Am I wrong or am I right? I'm right. I was looking at the finance director on that one. The point is, you don't talk about billing a parcel. You do talk about billing of property, and I'm sure there's multiple definitions of property, and we get into that. But from the standpoint of our being able to get this into some form that we could understand, that comports to our current billing process, that my understanding, that's all that this was ever intended to do. Am I right?
You're right.
And so many of the things that have come up here in criticism of this, those are criticisms of what was there before. So I don't think anybody here is questioning that perhaps we need to look at this. Or perhaps the next commission has to look at this. But my understanding is this was a process to be consistent with the way we actually bill customers. And we do it on our utility bills. I get a utility bill, I got a payment utility fee that's included on my utility bill. And that was my understanding what we did this. So, Commissioner Smith.
I was going to call for the vote, but I will say that I have no problem looking at this ordinance in the future with the commission. I think there was some valid points brought up tonight, but what's before us tonight is something we've talked about for a while. I won't make a motion at this moment because I see Commissioner Pownell and Commissioner Roth.
I better do it too.
But I don't think they need to say much.
Are you trying to stifle us? I only have one more meeting. I can drag this out.
As I was pointing out, three of us have little opportunity to speak anymore.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, darn. Carol, you can withdraw your name. You're going to be around for another.
No. You already skipped over me
Commissioner
once
Polly.
tonight, so I'm
Commissioner
going to
Polly.
talk this time.
Go, Carol, go.
Yes. Okay. Economic development is very important to me. Development-friendly community is extremely important to me. What we're talking about tonight, is just addressing one issue. It's clarification that the bin system is currently being used and that it's intended to be used. Since we've talked about this, new issues have been brought up this week, and that's something that we definitely need to consider 100%. Craig mentioned that he doesn't feel parcel is ambiguous, and parcel and the new property, it's still the bin system's going to be used. So that's still the same. That doesn't change. So there's been lots of new information. The new language is for clarification, which is very important on how the ordinance is already being applied. If it is to be applied differently, that is something for a work session for the next commission or to form a committee for. Let's see here. I have a lot of notes. We've already held it over for the second reading to get more testimony and to look at it more in depth. And that's been good. We've never had an appeal on a shared trip issue, but I can see that we'll probably have one coming. So I think it's really important that we look at the language and have a separate discussion about maybe including that or looking at that. But like I said, that's a separate issue. The one for tonight is just clarifying the language to how it's being used now. And developer workshops, this would be a good thing to talk about in the developer workshops that Eric Underwood has been having. And for communication and transparency, I think it's important on the billing to put the bin accounts that are being used, so people know what bin they are being billed for. I think that's very important. And that's all.
Commissioner Roth.
Okay. In my opinion, I don't see the necessity of handling these as separate issues. I think that leaving ambiguous definitions up to individual staff as judgment calls leaves the city in a libelous position, and decisions can change as staff changes. I'm having quite a bit of experience with that right now, and so I'm extremely worried about leaving the city in that position of staff changes affecting what happens to the city procedure and process in the future. And I also don't want to set precedent in order to avoid lawsuits or legal actions of any kind. So I'd rather make sure that revising this ordinance correctly and doing it in clear public view. So I see no harm in extending or holding this over the whole process to allow for more input and to allow greater transparency, even if it's just the facade of greater transparency. I don't like to err in any way in feeling like we are not being transparent.
Commissioner Mum.
Where do I begin? I have said for a very long time that I feel our SDCs in all are very high and they need to be looked at. I understand the nervousness from the community with making any changes. I think there's more to this than what we're talking about tonight. I think I'll be off the commission December 31st, and I'll be able to meet with everybody and tell you more. But I don't think the internal trips was not discussed when we discussed this. I think this is a new thing, and I think we do need to take this apart and look it over piece by piece, and I would suggest the new commission do that. And I truly I'm not nervous about leaving this with Commissioner Pauley and Smith, because I know that those two will follow up, and they will get this dissected, and the whole pavement maintenance fee, utility fee has been nothing but positive for our community. And I know that the businesses know that, and they appreciate it. They want to have a fair, equal shake, and I understand that completely. But I do believe that the two commissioners left here will follow through. And if they don't, trust me, I'll be out there. Mr. Bill will be hearing from me. So, yeah, this is near and dear to my heart, because this is something I started with, and I know that this is a good, positive thing for our city. Even though Mr. Lewis and I differ on what pavement maintenance fees can be used for, I say no bike and ped, and he says yes. But that'll be a discussion for a different matter. I'm hoping to be assigned to this committee, Commissioner Smith, Commissioner Pauley.
We're not the person you need to talk to about that.
Well,
The mayor.
but I don't want it to, I just think that it's an important thing, cleaning this up. I'm okay with that, but it has to be delved into. Every couple of years, you have to look at all of these programs and just make sure that they're always current and that you're always doing it for the right reason. And everybody's right.
I move to approve second reading of ordinance number 14-1018.
And final adoption.
And final adoption.
I second.
Thank you.
This is ordinance number 14-1018, an ordinance of the City of Oregon City adopting changes to the transportation utility fee of Oregon City Municipal Code, Chapter 13.30.
Vote, please. 4 yeses and 1 no. Again, it just says what we've been doing all along, and that's all it is. And I agree with everybody else. I think this needs to be taken a serious look
Yes.
at by the next commission.
Yes.
With that,
Sign me up.
motion on the consent agenda?
Move to approve. Consent agenda.
Second.
Oh.
Get used to it.
It was moved by Commissioner Mumman, seconded by Commissioner Pauley, and it's four yes, all unanimous on that. City Manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. While it's been a little bit quiet maybe on the Willamette Falls Legacy project, at least as far as the newspaper and media have been, there's a little article, I think this week in there about an award that the project won. We're very proud of that, and our staff teams work on that. But behind the scenes, our staff and Metro staff in particular have been working feverishly on the easement and some other things, and there's a lot of movement there, a lot of energy. We have some deadlines that we're up against from the state for the sale of those bonds to secure the $5 million. So deadlines are a good motivator, and they're having an effect on us, and also on Mr. Heidgerken. So I'm going to ask Mr. Conkle to give you a brief update on the Willamette Falls Legacy project.
Thank you, evening, Mayor and Commissioners. As all of you are aware, we were able to receive the $5 million appropriation from the governor's budget. Originally, the legislation indicated that we had until March 31st of 2015 to provide really 3 major things to receive those funds. A public property interest in access along the Blue Heron site, along the river for public access, a financial plan that the state signs off on as viable, identifying how local match of money would be provided to supplement the $5 million from the state, and essentially an agreement of cooperation to include appropriate state agencies in the design of the Riverwalk, primarily SHPO and state parks. The grant money, the appropriation money would be handled out of the State Parks Division for the state. As you recall, we did enter into a memorandum of understanding with all of the partners, including the state, identifying the roles that they would play, so we've met that. We believe we've met that requirement. We've been negotiating with both Mr. Heigurken as well as Portland General Electric for public access easements over the entirety of both properties, which would essentially provide public access from 99E through the Blue Heron property out the PG property to the dance floor, and then continuing down the rail spur on the Heigurken property. Those negotiations are going very well. We expect to have those in place in time to meet our commitments with the state. And then the final obligation is showing the financial commitment. We've discussed numerous times the amount of investment that's happened to date. It's approximately 1.9 million has been invested since the beginning of this process in 2011 by all of the partners into this project to get us where we're at. We believe we're putting together a financial plan that's acceptable to the state to show the ability of the local agencies to provide adequate funding to complete the design and engineering, as well as a phase 1 project for the Riverwalk. So all of this is due to the state by December 15th, and we fully intend to meet that deadline. So just wanted to give you an update on where we're at in the process. As Mr. Frazier did indicate, things have accelerated a little bit, but we've been able to successfully, we believe, meet the intent of the legislation that was passed.
Great.
Yeah.
And that concludes my report, but one more thank you to Ed Sullivan, because of all the people in this room, I think only he and Mr. Mahoney are the only two that haven't tired of me showing him baby pictures. So thank you.
I actually have. I don't. I have I've got a retort, but that's going to come on January 31st. So, in any case,
I can hardly wait.
I have no report. I'll start to my left.
Okay. Well, there's lots going on Main Street. In fact, we have the tree lighting ceremony on Saturday and Santa Claus, and the snowflake raffle is going on. It's continuing. It still has about a week and a half. So buy local, go out there. The snowflake raffle is going through the whole community, not just Main Street.
Thank you for doing that.
Mm-hmm. It's great. It's such a great program, and I think it's wonderful that it was spearheaded by Main Street, but it's including the rest of the community.
That's awesome.
So I think that's a great partnership there, and I love the direction that it's going. So lots of people involved in that, lots of businesses working together to just encourage people to buy local. So it's great. And that's all I have.
Gerard.
I don't have anything.
Commissioner Mum.
I don't have anything. C4 tomorrow. Should be fun.
Yeah, Commissioner Smith.
Couple things.
Be short.
I should be short, or my comment should be short.
You're right. You're all right.
You're all right.
Went through the Ermatinger house.
Oh, yes.
Oh my gosh.
I was scared.
Wow. It's unbelievable. I haven't been in the house for a few years. And so I was a bit overwhelmed by seeing the process of the house. It's absolutely incredible. It looks like a mess at the moment, but we can see the changes being made and how specific how specific attention is being paid to the history and the authenticity of the house. So we're really excited. I'm really excited about it. Working with a group of citizens to kind of talk about a plan for the future of the house and hopefully creating a friends group and all of that. And so there's some exciting things going on with that. I wanted to also say that the high school play is next week, 10th through the 13th, A Christmas Carol. Is the 13th the Snowflake event too, I think, right?
Yes.
Downtown. And the choir from the high school, or one of the choirs from the high school, will be performing down at Main Street on that event on the 13th. And I just looked at the weather report, Mayor, for the tree lighting. It's going to be warm. I remember last year it was very, very cold.
Yes.
And all we wanted was the tree to be lit. And quickly. And quickly. And it was not. It went on for a while. And yes, my mom will be there.
Yay.
I have to come back. I think that was a criticism to St. Nicholas and also to
John McLaughlin.
John
That's
McLaughlin.
true.
I think when people make complaints like that, they should have considered where St. Nicholas had come from. I don't think he felt that was particularly cold at all.
I'm sure we'll hear about it on Saturday.
I'm sure we will.
I have one more quick thing.
In fact, I'm going to ask a question of St. Nick, whether a certain person's mother got a chunk of coal in their for Christmas.
All right.
Yeah.
Oh, speaking of coal, it reminds me of our librarian, our library director, Maureen Cole, and we. It's pretty good.
We're getting kind of wild here.
Yeah. So tomorrow is the Oregon City Library, Friends of the Oregon City Library luncheon at the Ainsworth House. So if you have some time tomorrow afternoon at 11:30, it's great. We can go there and hear the architect speak about the plans for the library. So,
Great.
Yeah, if you have nothing to do, I encourage you to come.